Hi, this is Tanner from SeedCode, and I'd like to show you how easy it is to integrate DayBack into your FileMaker file. So I have a FileMaker file here called Meetings, and I created this using the built-in FileMaker templates. This file is used to keep track of meetings. It has dates and times, but it doesn't have an interface for displaying these in a calendar format. So I'd love to show these events in a calendar, and I'm going to use DayBack to accomplish that. So I've got the integration instructions here, and we can kind of just follow step by step. The first step being back up your file. So let's do that. Let's go back to the file. We'll say save a copy as. We can name this backup, for example. And we'll just save this to my desktop for now. You can save this wherever you'd like, but I'm just going to save it to the desktop. So now that we've done that, let's talk about the type of integration we're doing here. We're doing a linking integration, and we do have a few options even with that. I think I'm going to choose the option where we just display the events or these records as events in DayBack. So we're not going to do any child tables. We're just displaying these exactly as they are in DayBack. So now we can move on to step number 2, since we've decided what type of linking we're doing. And in step number 2, we do need to add some fields into our file. There are some required fields in DayBack, so let's open up DayBack and check that out. So if we go to Manage Database here in DayBack, and then we go to our sample events table, you'll notice that we have these organized pretty well. The fields that are required are going to be ID. Hopefully you already have one of those. Date start, date end, time start, time end, summary and description are both required, although they don't have to be named what they're named here. It will make it a lot easier if they are, though. So you may want to take the time, if you already have these fields in your database, to rename them what they are named here, and then once the integration's done, you can name them back to whatever you'd like. If you don't have these fields, you can copy and paste these from here into your file, or just create them manually. Status is not required, although I do recommend having some type of status field. We base the calendar colors on this, or the event colors on this, and some other things. And then resources is totally optional. So these are the fields we're going to copy and paste, but before we do that, I want to make sure in our file that we have those required fields. So let's go to File, Manage Database, and then we're going to check out our fields. So we do have an ID field. We have a title or summary field that we can use. Date start, time end. It doesn't look like we have a date end field. So I'm going to say date end, and we can just match, since I'm making it anyway. I'll just match what we have, and this is a date formatted field, so we're going to add that in. And then I've also noticed that we don't have a status field in here, so I'm going to add in status, and that's going to be a text field. Now, normally I'd want to take the time and name these what they are in DayBack, like I said, because it's going to make integration a lot easier. But I want to do it without doing that to show kind of worst case scenario here for the integration. So let's look at the integration instructions. It's telling us to open up DayBack, and we want to copy and paste these fields here. So the DBK fields. So let's go to File, Manage Database, and we're going to find in the sample events table those DBK fields. We're going to select all those, copy, and we're going to navigate back to our file. Same thing, we're going to go to Manage Database, and this is our events table, and we want to paste this right in here in the events table. So going down the line here with these fields, you'll notice that there's some information that's commented out, and that's probably because there's fields that are referenced here that don't exist in this table. If we would have taken the time to rename those fields, this problem wouldn't exist, but we didn't. So, and that's just fine. We can go down here. We're going to remove the comments. This field in particular, Event Summary Calc, is used to aggregate multiple data fields and put them all together as an event title, essentially, when viewing the events. So let's start with a summary field, or otherwise known as title. Description field, I don't think I have a description field, so I'm going to use location. And then here, I don't really want to use this field now. I can always come back to this later, but right now, I just want to mark this as unused. So we have this great little field called DBK unused, and it basically is just a placeholder field. I'm just going to copy and paste this. Oh. And then we'll do the same thing for email, because I don't really have an email that I want to use right now. So we're going to say OK and move on to the next one. This field here, Web Viewer Source, is actually what we're going to use to display information or send information to the calendar. So we want to make sure to map these fields with the appropriate data here too. So for example, ID, we're going to make ID, date start, in this case is date, time start, start time, end date, we just added that field. So it's going to be right here, date end. Oh, it matches because I named that correctly, so we don't have to remap that. So you can see how much faster this could be if we took the time to name these up front, because then you don't have to map all this stuff. It's basically already done. And that's right. And then description, we were using location. And then again, we're not going to use resource, so we can use our DBK unused field. Status I created, so we can leave that. And we want to do DBK unused for these guys also. And project and project name. All right, and make sure the field's not commented anymore, which it is not. Then we're going to move down to the time start calcs and end calcs, and same thing. So we're going to remap our date start and time start to what they are in our file, and then we're going to do the same thing here for the end time calc. So date start is date, date end is right because I named that correctly, start time and end time. Now the last guy here, the color calc, this is used just to display colors on a FileMaker layout, so it's not necessary, but in this case we did make a status field so everything lines up perfectly and we don't have to uncomment anything. We're good to go. So once we get that taken care of, let's take a look here and see what our next step is. So once we've pasted that, we need to go through the field definitions, which we've done. So event summary calc, we took care of that. Web viewer source, took care of that. Color calc, taken care of. So our next step here is adding the auto enter calcs for times. So this auto enter calc here is used for events that might span midnight. So let's copy this and we're going to paste it into our time start and time end fields, and then we want to make sure that we uncheck the do not replace existing value checkbox. So our time start is, that's timestamp start. We want start time, and we'll come in here and I'm just going to replace what's in there with this guy. We've already unchecked do not replace existing value, so we're good there, and then we're going to do the same for end time. And we've also already checked or unchecked that value there. Okay, so I think once we're done here, so pause and save your work, so we can do that. We can say okay, and then you might want to save a copy as at this point. So let's move on to the next step, the relationship graph. And what we want to do here is return to DayBack, select File, Manage, and we want to edit the relationships. We're going to double click on sample events and change where that table occurrence is pointing. So let's do that. Here we are at the DayBack file. We're going to go to Manage, Database, the Relationships tab. We're going to double click on sample events. And we want to re-imprint the table that this is pointing to. So we're going to say add FileMaker data source. We're going to pick our file. In this case, it's meetings. And then we want to pick our events table. But we do want to rename this to sample events. We can change this later once integration is done, but it's going to be a lot easier if we stick with the same name. You'll notice that the relationships are no longer valid, and that's because in my table in meetings, I don't have a contact ID, phase ID, or project ID. I can come back and add those and reconnect these relationships later. So for now, I'm just going to remove the relationship. They're simple one-to-one relationships. If you add any of the ID fields to your events table, very simple to just add those later. All right, so we're going to say OK. We're going to get a little message that says there's a problem, and that's totally OK. We haven't mapped our fields on a layout here yet, which we're going to do next. So for now, just say halt, and we're going to be left here at this screen. So we do talk a little bit about contacts and projects here. If you do want to use contacts and projects, again, you can loop back to this later. Just come back to this step 3.1 and read and follow the directions there. So the next step we want to do is the field mapping layout. And what we need to do to accomplish this is go to the source number 1 layout in the DayBack file and map some fields. And we do have a couple of tips here. So just to reiterate, we do require the date start, date end, time start, time end fields. We don't require necessarily that there's data in your end, date, and time fields, but we do require that they're here and mapped. So to map these fields, we're going to navigate here to the source number 1 layout. We're going to go into layout mode. You'll notice that this table is associated with the sample events table occurrence, which is now data coming from our meetings file. And we just want to double click on each one of these fields and match them up. So ID field, date start, so that was date in this case, date end, so we want to find our end date field or date end, time start, so start time. And most of these, regardless of the name, probably aren't going to be mapped correctly because I believe this is based on the order of your fields. So you probably will have to go through each one of these. But it's real quick. We just double click and pick them real quick, especially these DBK because those are pretty obvious. Time end, so DBK time end. And then we're going to pick summary, which again is probably title or summary depending on your file or what you're using. So let's find our title field. Couldn't see it there for a second. Description, we are using location in this case. And then our event summary calc, which we have right here. Okay, and then we want to do the same thing for these other tabs. I'm not using resources currently. Again, we can always come back to this. So I'm going to use DBK unused. The notified field we have because it's a DBK field, so I'm going to associate it with it, even though I could use DBK unused because I'm not actually using that. And I did create that status field, so we're going to select status. Repeating events, we can choose the repeating ID, which is included. Contacts, I'm not using this right now currently. Again, we can come back to this when we're ready. And then the Gantt chart, we actually don't have a UI for this yet, although we do have these back-end fields that we can map. I'm not using this at all. I would recommend mapping these to DBK unused, but for right now, I'm just going to leave this as it is. So let's go into browse mode. And then down at the bottom here of this layout, you'll notice we have a run upon opening button that we can click. So we're going to click run upon opening. And what we should be left with here, which we are, is our events. So these are all events coming from our meetings table here, our meetings file here, and they're showing up on our calendar. Now, if we want to create a new event, we can just double click anywhere on the calendar, and it'll create a new event in that slot. And we can say this is a new event. Change the dates, whatever we want to do. We're not using these fields, so it doesn't do us any good to put any data in there right now, but we can say save, and that's going to save the event. We can also change the color of these events. Again, we linked our status field, so if we choose a status, we can save that, and you can see that now that's colorized based on that status. And that's all configurable. You can read the docs and figure out how to do that. Now, if we go back to the docs, we do have going further. I would highly recommend reading this, following the directions, and checking out some of the things you can do. Specifically, you're probably going to want to go to General Settings in Script Manager and set up some of the options for the calendar. Hopefully, you're confident moving forward. You can get things set up how you'd like. Of course, let us know if you have any questions or concerns. Phone call or email works great. Thank you.